Hello everyone, Mollusk here, and welcome to another Warhammer Fantasy Battle Report. Today we have Waaagh Grom the Paunch versus the Kindred of Ghorros Warhoof. The scenario meant that we had to deploy our troops at random across the table, so that's what you see here. It's not the battle line we had intended, I'm sure. He had to set all his army up first, so I've deployed as best I can. We're given the random placement with the Centaur with Ghorros behind the Minosaurs on the left flank, and with both my Razor Gores off over here, and their plan is to go off charging the Goblins ahead of them and drawing out the fanatics that I'm pretty sure are in there, and with any luck maybe get into his war machine. The group of Ghor holding my centre with my general are planning to stay back and basically blast people with spells, because I don't really think much of the Ghor's chances in combat, and let the Minosaurs and the Gorgon there charge off and wreck face on the other side of the river. So yeah, that's pretty much the plan. Over on his side we have some river trolls, we have a wolf chariot, a doom diver, Grom the Paunch, and you can see there's some boar riders. I think they're boar biggins, and there's a better picture of them. Next to them is a big unit of night goblins with nets and probably fanatics. Next to that is a catapult of some kind, and then a big unit of goblin archers, a level 3 shaman on a wyvern, however you pronounce that, and then another unit of boar boys with a black orc war boss. On my left flank I have my unit of Ungor raiders. Their plan is to jump in the rivers first and find out what they are, and hopefully make use of whatever that. I think that was a arcane ruin, something like Temple of Heroes or something, which makes you stubborn and slightly better in combat by being in it. So I was hoping to just sit there with them, maybe try to draw off some chariots or some trolls, and basically plink away. This is my centre. From the left we've got a unit of Minosaurs with double hand weapons, the Centaur with Ghorros Warhoof, the Gorgon, the unit of Ghor with my Shaman General, Great Shaman General, and another unit of Minosaurs with my Battle Standard Bearer. Off to the right we have my two Razor Gore. Starting things off with a bang, my opponent failed his animosity check with this unit of boar boys on his, or I guess on my right flank, from our perspective, and his war boss quelled the unruly mob by beating 3 of them to death. So yeah, not a good start for my opponent. Over in the centre, not a lot of movement. I think my opponent is used to playing dwarves, but a major problem for him is that his cavalry chariots are right up against a forest, and he doesn't know what that forest is, and is pretty scared of those dangerous terrain checks, understandably. So that's really kind of hampering his movement. So he's just moved the trolls up a little bit, and I think he shifts the goblins a little bit up as well. But other than that, the orc and goblin line holds. Oh, and here's a picture of the remaining boar boys and the shaman shifting up down the flank, hoping to get it into my backfield, no doubt. In the magic phase, the winds blew pretty weakly, and he managed to summon enough power to cast Headbutt on my Razor Gore, which didn't do anything. However, I revealed my Frog Scroll, and his shaman was transformed into a small slimy toad, riding a great big wyvern, which was hilarious. The Beastmen Turn. We lose no time in heading up the field towards the foe. On the left flank, the Ungor plunged through one river. It turned out to be a river of light, and I think they got the speed of light spell cast on them They plunged into the next river, which turned out to be a raging torrent, and one of them was swept downstream. The what they call Minotaurs headed up and just dipped their toes in the raging torrent because they didn't really fancy taking those dangerous terrain checks. Ghorros and his unruly sons sprung out from behind them and went across the hill because they didn't fancy taking any dangerous terrain, and the Goblin moved up behind them. The Minotaurs with the Gorbel battle standard bearer also moved up onto the hill, and I think there's a Razor that decided not to trust the water either, and also is in front of the Minotaurs there, and the plan is to charge at the Goblins next turn and lure out Fanatics, which I'm pretty sure are in that unit. The other Razor has moved up, as you can see, again, just trying to double team those Goblins, and the Gore unit have moved behind the enemy, behind the Minotaurs, and the plan is to sit back and protect the rear of my enemy, of my army, from the boar boys that kind of come around the flank. In the magic phase, the winds blew pathetically, and I tried to cast Doom and Dark. No, what's it called? Pit of Shades on 3 dice and failed. And then my Ungor fired at the river trolls and did nothing. I think they hit it. They managed to hit them, but no wounds. Orcs and Goblins turn 2, and these war boys haven't learnt their lesson. The Black Orc has to beat another 2 of them down in order to maintain control, and so the unit is looking a little bit thin on the ground now. In the centre, the Goblin unit with the spears, the Night Goblins, failed their animosity as well and were forced to charge the Razor who was in front of the Minotaurs. And Razor fled, and the Goblins piled into the Minotaurs behind it, which wasn't quite what I planned. The River Trolls declared a charge on the Centaur and made it, and the Goblin Chariot declared a charge on the Ungor and failed. And there's another picture of what looks to be an epic clash on that earthwork bridge. In the movement phase, the Boar Boy Biggins in the centre manoeuvre out from behind the forest. The Goblin Archers stay where they are, and the Wyvern and the Boar Boys continue to move down the flank, I think. Magic's a bit of a write-off because his big shaman is a toad, and his other shaman isn't really in range to do anything. In the shooting phase, the archers managed to take 2 wounds off the Razor facing them from across the river, which was kind of annoying. Back in the centre, turns out there were 3 Goblin Fanatics in that unit of Night Goblin Spearmen. They thrashed their way through the Minotaurs, doing, I forget how many wounds, but I think I had about 3 Minotaurs on 1 wound remaining and 1 on 2 wounds. They did quite a number of wounds to the Minotaurs, and then they all crashed into the Goat unit beyond and took a hefty toll. In combat, the Goblins net the Minotaurs, reducing their strength by 1. They take a few wounds, do some more wounds, and have a ton of combat res with all their ranks and all the wounds the Fanatics did, break and run down the Minotaurs, getting through into my back lines. And I'm starting to develop quite a healthy respect for these little buggers. On the other side of the earthwork, the Centaur fail their fear check against the trolls. They managed to do a wound. Ghorros whiffs all of his attacks, and the trolls beat down 2 of the Centaur. They then proceed to stomp down the rest of the other 2, but Ghorros has had a particularly heavy night the night before, and is raging drunk still, and so he's stubborn and sticks around, holding the line like the hero he is. I should probably mention that this turn I had to take a lot of break tests, what with things running away, like the Razor and the Minotaurs running away and breaking and dying, and it really does help to have a lot of frenzied units all around. So yeah, I was quite lucky at that in that regard. But to lose all those Minotaurs and the Razor Gore because the Goblins pursued into it and killed that was quite painful. In my go, you may notice that the Ungor seem to have moved back a couple of rivers, and that's because they took more dangerous terrain casualties from the Raging Torrent, panicked, ran away through the River of Light again, which cast a spell which meant that they instantly regrouped. So they're playing around in the River of Light currently. The Minotaurs, who appear to have lost one of their number to the Doom Diver the previous turn, charged across the river, passed all their dangerous terrain, and got into the Wolf Chariot, which I was very happy about. The Gorgon charged into the Trolls, and just after this we remembered that the Trolls needed to stomp on the Centaur, and so two of those Centaur died subsequently. My Gore unit reformed to face the Goblin's flank, and I made a bit of a mistake here. I meant to take the Great Brain Shaman out of that unit, as I didn't want him in combat, but I forgot. On the right flank, I moved my Razor Gore away from the river and all the shooting, and try to put him in a position where he can cause problems and delay the War Boys getting into my backfield now that I have to deal with those Goblins in my centre. In the magic phase, the Great Spray Shaman cast Occam's Mind Razor on Ghorros, and successfully, so he now has a strength of 8. What a man. The shooting phase, I don't think the Ungor were anywhere near anyone to shoot. So, in combat, do we go? The Gorgon has been moved out of combat because I just couldn't get him to bounce on the hill, so he's still there. Ghorros failed his fear check again, but passed his Primal Fury. And out of 4 attacks, 3 of them hit on 6s. He then proceeded to kill 2 trolls and wound another one with his Man Smasher. What a beast. He's really holding his ground there. And I believe the Gorgon ate the rest of them. Ate that last troll. Or clawed it to pieces. Overran and is in the trees there where you see. Ghorros is turned slightly in order to get a flank charge on, or in order to go round and safely get off into the other side without having to go through the river. Animosity time. The Goblins decide that they really don't like the look of those Boar Boys and run off and attack them. They don't do any damage to the Boar Boys and they get a smack for their trouble, losing 2 of their number. The most important thing is that both of them can't do anything else this turn, which is great. Grom doesn't like the look of those Minotaurs or the big cow thing wading through the forest and slips through the gap, which was quite a good move actually. I didn't see that coming. I think that's a picture of the Boar Boys with the Black Orc failing a charge. It was a pretty ambitious one and they didn't make it, which is quite good. That leaves them in quite a nice position. So now it's time for some charges. Ghorros, bellowing a challenge, descends down the hill to fight in single combat with Grom the Paunch. It's going to be an epic duel. The Minotaurs slam into the Doom Diver, and they're looking forward to getting some revenge because that thing's been quite painful so far. The Gorgon charges through the forest into the flank of the Boar Boys, and I was really happy to get that charge because I wasn't really sure what I was going to be able to do to them, hitting them head on with anything. In the centre we go into the Goblins, who have turned around to face us in their previous turn, and I'm not sure how this is going to go. I think I've got a chance, and I'm really hoping to finish them off before the Boar Boys hit me in the back. I debated what to do here a little bit. I thought about putting the Razor Gore just in front of the Boar Boys so they'd have to charge and so slow them up for one turn. but I was looking at a nice flank charge and getting the Razor Gore into that Shaman, and I didn't feel I could pass that up, so I charged in. This turned out to be a bit of a mistake because he just made way with his Black Orc Warboss, who had no trouble taking down the pig with its one wound. Yeah, so that was a bit of a mistake. Over in the centre, despite it being toughness 7, the Minotaurs have no problem slaughtering the Doomdiver Catapult. And the Gorgon, despite whiffing its rolls and only doing 1 wound, so I think I had 8 attacks by this point, for being frenzied and having won a combat previously. Hitting on 4s, I hit with 1 attack. And that attack wounded and killed the Boar Boy, and then I stomped on a couple. They didn't do anything in return and fled, but got away. So I'm looking at this and I'm quite happy with how things are going at this point. This is going well. Over here, Grom just can't land a blow with the Centaur hero stumbling around everywhere in front of him. In fact, none of his little helpers or wolves can even touch the drunken Centaur. On his part, Ghorros manages to hit, even though he fails his Primal Fury this round, which would have been really helpful. And although he does D3 wounds, he only wounds Grom once, which is a shame, but hey, I really wasn't expecting him to survive, as Grom has a higher initiative, and we couldn't see whether or not that axe is a great weapon. So it doesn't say that it is, so we assumed that it wasn't. And so he actually goes first in this combat. So Ghorros, with 1 wound left, has done well to survive there. The Goblins decide they have to get their shiz together this turn. And I don't think there's any failed animosity. The Wyvern heads up behind the wall, which I think was some kind of mighty bulwark or something. So he didn't want to get quite too close to that because he's a force of destruction and it does bad things to forces of destruction. The Goblins turn round, the Boar Boys rally, which was pretty important for them, but I'm not sure they like the view. Oh dear. The Boar Boys make their quite long charge into the rear of my Gore unit, and yeah, it's all over. That Goblin Warboss, it's got 5 attacks. They're really good. Those Warbosses are really good. Yeah, they do a number on my Gore unit. Easily break it and easily run it down, and there goes my general. So that things are starting to go a little bit south. In combat, Grom finally finishes off Ghorros, and it is a sad day for the Beastmen. Particularly as anyone who is capable of benefiting from his demise is either dead or an Ungor, and that doesn't really matter very much. Yeah, it was going to happen, but I'm still sad. Still sad. So it's time to get some revenge. The Gorgon and the Minotaurs charge headlong into the Boar Boys, and they clean up. I think the Gorgon does most of the damage, and then the Minotaurs just finish off the remaining champion and overrun a mighty 2 inches and end up where you see. In the Orc and Goblin turn, not fancying tangling with the big cow creatures without reason, most of the Goblin army heads over towards the Ungors, who are quivering in their Bastion of Heroes. Things are not looking particularly good for them. In the magic phase, the Great Shaman on the Wyvern, who stopped being a slimy toad a couple of turns ago, finally gets the Foot of Gork spell off. And wow, the Monty Python green foot comes down on the cow and the Minotaurs and does a couple of wounds. It comes down again and does a couple more wounds. It comes down again and does a few more, killing most of the Minotaurs, and then comes down again 4 times. This foot just jumps up and down on my cows. And yeah, you can see all the Minotaurs die. I take a wound or so on my Gorgon, and wow. On the 5th time, the foot comes down, slips, and lands on Grom himself. Grom is fine. I think he slips between Gork's mighty toes, but his chariot is squished. So a silver lining, I guess, but wow, that spell is powerful. I've been lucky to stop it a couple of times previously in this game, and it just slipped through. Without my shaman, I can't really compete with his magic casting anymore, and yeah, suffered the consequences. In what is probably the shortest turn of Warhammer I've ever played, the Ungor bravely shuffle back into the River of Light, splashing around, and this time they get caged in light. I can't remember what the spell was, but it means that they can't move, shoot, or do anything, or they'll have to take some kind of strength test or die probably, which wasn't quite what I was hoping for. Thinking about it now, I should have gone into the Raging Torrent, but my idea was to try to get the War Boys to be taking difficult terrain, or dangerous terrain even, and I should have gone into the Raging Torrent in an attempt to try to make everybody take dangerous terrain. But I thought maybe that things would get banished or something in the River of Light. So yeah, that was my thinking there. Probably not the best thing to do in hindsight. And I turn the Gorgon to face and try to make sure that the goblins can't get out of his charge arc next turn. In the final Orc and Goblin turn, I think everyone passes their animosity. The Wyvern Shaman moves up out of line of sight of the Gorgon. The archers stand there and shoot at it, don't do any wounds. The magic phase, the Shaman tried to cast Headbutt on the Gorgon. It didn't wound, and in fact he miscasts, but he rolled a 7, and since there was nothing in base contact, nothing really happened. I did wonder whether or not he would hit his mount by miscasting, but we decided it probably wouldn't in the end. Meanwhile, on the other flank, the Ungor take a charge from both Grom the Paunch and the Night Goblin unit. So, despite his rather bulky stature, Grom managed to make that charge with an 11. So yeah, those Ungor are pretty dead. And to top it off, both of them got, both the Night Goblins and Grom got time warped by the river. So they're striking, always strikes first, +1 attack, double movement, etc, etc. So those Ungor who are caged in light aren't looking too safe right there. In combat, Grom kills all but one of the Ungor, and there aren't actually any left in base contact with the other unit, so the Ungor just runs away and gets run down by the goblins. So my last remaining model, the Mighty Gorgon, declares a charge at the goblin archers. They stand and shoot. Oh, it looks like he's got some wounds on him. Oh, those are extra wounds from the Gork foot. So, yeah, they don't really do anything and fail their terror test and run away. And he's chasing them down, but fails to catch them. And that's the end of the game. The field's looking pretty empty there, especially empty of beastmen. What a game. What a slaughter. Orcs and Goblins are hilarious to play with all their animosity and crazy rules. So I really, really enjoyed this game. The highlights for me were probably turning his shaman into a frog, because I seriously didn't think that was going to work, and it worked so well. Taking his shaman out of the game for a couple of turns. Looking at what that foot of Gork can do, I think that was really quite important in the end. I didn't realise that it would be. I also really liked Ghorros's heroic stand on the bridge, taking down those trolls and wounding Grom, even though he regenerated it later on. Yeah, and what can I say? Outplayed, outstomped. My opponent was a really, really great guy to play. He's always lots of fun, and a fantastic host. And so the sun sets on another battle. Thanks for watching.